the average person, does not see death the amount of times that they do, and it could be like, I would ask anyone listening to this how many times that you drive by, like you're in traffic, and then you're driving through, and then you look over and you see what the traffic, what the accident was, and that it was bad, and you're like just like shivering, like oh my God, like something catastrophic happened, and you just saw probably someone died. Like that happens, like that's a routine occurrence for police officers who roll up onto the scene of it, and no, they don't have to use their gun, or there's no, but to actually see death the amount that they do, it's just the amount of baggage and stuff that they go through, that probably more than anything gave me that appreciation.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
I gained a new appreciation because most of those cops like live in town, or like they know that what happened. They know they not only like a that they investigated and all their hard work is for naught, but they live in that town and they have to drive by and know that two people got away with not bilking someone, not the financial crimes, right? I mean, stuff like that doesn't get prosecuted all the time. Like there's, stuff that falls through the cracks. I mean,
it's a murder,
homicide,
yeah.
the murder, and it is befuddling to a lot of people, locally.
And I know that's a big interest too. So that story probably did very, very well.
It did.
All right, because that's a true crime is always real interesting. It's still interesting to me. I'm 11 years gone from the job, and I'm that guy watching on YouTube when the detectives bring the guy in the box and they're interviewing him. I watch it all the time.
Yeah.
And they're like, the detectives are so good in the way they ask the questions, and they have all this information, and they're just trying to get him to confess. So that's now when you culminate a story such as that, what kind of personal satisfaction do you get? It's like, you can put your head on the pillow knowing that you did your job very well.
A lot. I probably would leave the business if it wasn't for if I still get satisfaction by opening up the newspaper and seeing, my byline on the front page of the newspaper. So that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect is the family, right? The family who read the story, they ended up buying like 70 Star Ledger newspapers that day and hand delivered it to like everyone in that small little neighborhood, put it on their front step, basically, this happened here, and, you need to know about it, because that story, had so many different obstacles that we had legal issues as well with that story. So at one point, about 10 months into the reporting, we had to cut bait and basically had to call the family and say, listen, I don't know if we're going to get this over the finish line. There's too much we're dealing with from a legal standpoint.
That's frustrating.
And they were so disappointed, and to have that conversation like right before the holidays, it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal.
And then once you land a story like that was so successful and so personally valuable to you as a journalist, as a reporter, you're only as good as the last story you wrote. That's the problem, right? That's the big problem. You could win a Pulitzer, you could do all that stuff, but now what's Keith Sargeant going to do next? So, like, where did that ever pop in your mind, or are you sort of relishing in that victory a little bit?
No doubt. I was onto the story that that I talked to you. The reason why we met is like, okay, my editor had a phone call and said, "What do you want to do now?" And the one thing that really bothered me, haunted me, dealing with as many law enforcement sources that I've dealt with in the last 4 years, and knowing what they go through, and knowing that suicide is just like it was almost, I felt like every couple months, every couple weeks, really, I was opening up the paper and seeing another cop committed suicide, and I was like, well, why is this happening?
Well, so I'll tell everybody the story of how we got connected.
Sure.
You had reached out to, I believe, Stephanie
Yep.
Samuels.
Yep.
And I was on a train going down to Washington, D.C., or I was actually coming back from Washington, D.C.
We got disconnected like 4 times.
Right. And, Stephanie had said, hey, I need you to talk to this gentleman here. And we spoke. We got all that stuff down. And then we go and meet. Now, when we met, here's the funny thing, and this is a little foreboding, and it's a little ominous. Mike had not taken his life yet.
No.
we were talking. I just came out with my book, and we're talking about that stuff. And I told you a little bit about my story, and you read the book. And then, so you think the story's going one way, and all of a sudden this tragedy happens, and then the story takes on this whole different light.
No doubt.
It was crazy, and you had asked me for a couple different sources, and I gave you the people who I thought would give the best insight. Tom, I'm sorry I couldn't give your name. No, Tom, I gave your name.
Yes,
and
we spoke.
Yeah.
I imagine that happens a lot, where you start with a concept, and the story sort of morphs into something else. Is that kind of what happened here?
So my daughter is probably 4 years old at the time. So I had to have been, she's 19 now, so 15 years ago. I remember, during pickup, one of the grandmothers of picking up one of my daughter's classmates in school was like really like crying. Basically, what had happened was someone she was very close to, who was a state trooper who lived in Keyport, where I live, or was from Keyport, committed suicide. I knew him a little bit from, like, I always work out of a coffee shop, and he would come in there, and we would chat. He was talk sports or whatever, and like we chatted a little bit, but I didn't know him. A lot of people in town where I lived, very close knit, small community, were. It was, I never forgot it, and it was one of those things where, I never wanted to write about it. Obviously, wanted to give the family as much space as possible, but it was something I never forgot. And then again, dating back to where I actually have an opportunity to like pick my next project, that's kind of what I wanted to do. Not a lot of people, because it's a hard story to tell, and I knew it was going to take a long time to do it right. But yeah, it probably started from that 15 years ago.
With this particular story, in this story, hopefully, if we timed this correctly, the article should come out in, can I say the name of the newspaper?
Sure.
It's comes out in the New York Star Ledger, and it's about this suicide issue with inside law enforcement. It should come out right about the time this airs.
We hope. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, we hope.
As long as Tom doesn't stop suing us and holding it up.
Full disclosure, very open.
How many sources did you have to go to before you figured that you felt like you got a full picture of everything?
I think I added it up. I talked to 48 people.
Wow.
For the story.
But there were some people who closed the door on you, though, that didn't want to talk to you.
Oh, yeah.
Which is crazy, because this is a problem.
Big time. And that was the biggest obstacle. And there's nothing like, I think when I talked to Tom at the end of our conversation, he admitted he doesn't trust journalism, journalists, right? I mean, at one point, like, you have, and I don't blame you. I mean, we talked about the Asbury Park Press, right? But NJ.com, the Star Ledger, where we work, have done stories about police and salaries and force and some of those issues, right? So there is a barrier between journalists and and the law enforcement community, right? Understandably so. I came up in a time, it was a little bit different, where like you would rely on a lot of cops to give you information because you knew how hard they were working, but at a time where there was more of a trust with the media.
Well, the Asbury Park Press printed all our salaries. Like, that was the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Of it. That was the beginning of it. We were like, hey, what the hell, man?
That's not a real big trust builder, right?
No, there's no doubt, and there's no doubt. But so when we were going through the this, and I would have a standard try to talk to as many people as possible. It was really hard to talk to police chiefs and people who ran the departments, right? And I won't tell you who, because you'll read the story. But two major, cities in the state, the chiefs from those. But it took a while, and they were amazing. Once you get them talking, it's an issue that everyone wants to talk about. They all have they all see it as a huge problem, but to get them to talk about it. Very, very difficult.
I think in this day and age, I think that is going to get easier as a problem as a whole. I think it's going to get easier because the old guard who a lot of these police chiefs have 30, 35 years on. And when they first got on, you didn't talk about this stuff. You swept it under the carpet. This was not something that you really wanted out in the public. That's changing now. You got some younger blood coming in, and these people are ready to, like, let's get rid of this. Let's figure out why, and let's get rid of this. And the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, and then we can sort of get rid of it. And so out of this story that you wrote, what type of fulfillment or what type of resolution, I don't want you to give away the story.
Oh, yeah.
But what type of resolution internally did Keith Sargeant get from this article?
A few things, okay? One, it gave me an appreciation of what, police officers go through. I think we talked about it before where, the average person, does not see death the amount of times that they do. And it could be like, I would ask anyone listening to this how many times that you drive by, like you're in traffic and then you're driving through and then you look over and you see what the traffic, what the accident was, and that it was bad, and you're like just like shivering, like oh my God, like something catastrophic happened, and you just saw probably someone died. You're like, that happens, like that's a routine occurrence for police officers who roll up onto the scene of it, and no, they don't have to use their gun or there's no, but to actually see death the amount that they do. It's just the amount of baggage and stuff that they go through, that probably more than anything gave me that appreciation. And, I from my standpoint, like I love talking to, interesting people, right? I love talking, trying to, one thing I about your book, right? And I'm trying to do it with, I'm writing a book about my dad, the Vietnam story. And the reason why it's taken as long as it has is my editor wants me to open up a vein and basically write about myself. And you did that phenomenally. I mean, you literally just, which I admire.
Emotional vomit.
100%. So when you get, the police officers who we talked to actually open up about it, it was like opening up a vein. I mean, it was like really emotional stuff. So I love telling that story.
Very important, I think. You mentioned before the distrust between law enforcement and journalism. But with these issues, the issues that we talk about here, I think there's a higher value. And I put it on my mug. It's truth over silence, right? In some ways, we're both fact finders. We're investigators searching for the truth. And the silence is not an option with the things that we deal with.
So you touched on that death, right? So we see death a lot. When you see death a lot, you start looking for differences, right? So you see, how many people died in a car accident, where you start picking up on just the differences between the dead bodies. Oh, wow, look, nipple rings. Like, I'm dead serious, and that's just a real thing. Oh, wow, look, nipple rings. Oh, geez, I didn't think anybody could fit in a part. Oh, wow, he shit himself. I know as sick as that sounds, you want something,
the coping mechanism,
different inside each death just to make it feel real again, because it doesn't feel real anymore. You become very desensitized to it. You become very shut down. It's not a healthy place to sit.
Yeah.
It really, really isn't.
You're seeing people on their worst day. I mean, people are not calling the police to get their cat out of the tree. They're literally their worst moments, like domestic violence and the worst times to see people. Like, you have to deal with that. You have to sift through it, and you have to. It's brutal.
I've never been called once to tell by a resident to say that their kid graduated high school.
No celebratory events.
Nope. So this article is coming out. Do you have something picked for your next project?
Maybe, but yeah, nothing concrete. I mean, if you have any ideas, every once in a while they'll rope me back and they cover Rutgers, because I'm still plugged in with a lot of, like, I had to do a lot of NIL. The big thing in college sports is paying athletes, and I had to do, some NIL stuff. So, again, we talk about the mental health side of it. I had just done 13 months on the mentally challenged guy, basically covering, investigating a homicide, to do suicide cops. I mean, there's a chance I might try to do something a little bit more uplifting and try to find some. It's hard to
We do that in here.
get too close to the sun.
We do that in here. So we hear a lot of stuff in here, right? So we'll hear this after this. Every once in a while, I have to bring in. There's a group of people who I bring in. I'm like, all right, let's just have some fun. Let's just release some energy, have some fun, and it always comes out to be a great show. And guess what? I'm rejuvenated. I'm realigned. I'm ready to go do my job again. And I love that stuff. So where can our audience find you? Oh, by the way, before we get into that, this book about your father.
Yeah.
Any light on the horizon when that's coming?
I signed a deal right after the holidays, I guess around the holidays in 2021. It's been a unbelievable process of talking to other people who he served with, his lieutenant and other people. What I did was when I got those letters and I got all those photos, like I don't know how many people would have done this, but the journalist in me would look at all those photos and see the names on it, and my father would write their names and actually where they were from. And I end up investigating. I'm able to find people pretty easily. Get their phone numbers and and be able to kind of find people, track people down. So I reached out to probably a dozen people who my father had served with, and one of them, Nick Martinez, lived in Michigan, called me in April of 4 or 5 months later, and told me basically my father saved his life in Vietnam, and
Wow.
Which was unbelievable. Like so again, journalist and me, I find my tape recorder. I'm like, I got to record him, and like we talk for a half hour, and he's like, basically, I wouldn't be talking to you if it wasn't for your dad. He was my best friend. I've been looking for him for 50 years, right? So Nick, right away, I went out to Michigan, met him, met his wife, and he was a big part of that story, and he's a big part of the book, and I'll tell you how much of a hero this guy is. We talk about heroes, right? Nick, Bronze Star, like he was like very, very, like he had multiple Purple Hearts, right? And about a year and a half ago, I had no idea. I'm just one day, I'm like, you know what? Because I hadn't talked to him in a while. It was like kind of a morbid type thing. I'm like, hopefully he's okay, because I had texted him. He didn't get back to me. And I just wanted to make sure, like, I just was hoping that I wouldn't find like an obituary. So Nick Martinez, Michigan, an M Live story came up. And basically Nick was in a supermarket in Michigan where he's from. He saw a mentally challenged guy, deranged guy, wielding a knife in the aisle of the supermarket, wielding it at this kid, like an 18-year-old kid. And Nick got in the middle of it, got stabbed himself, and like punctured his lung, saved the kid's life. The person got arrested and ended up doing serious jail time. I did not know. Like I talked to Nick probably 4 or 5 times after that, between the time that happened, and I had no idea. And it took me Googling him to find out whether or not he was still alive. So then I called him right away, and he picked up. I'm like, dude, what the heck?
In much the same way journalism and reporting is in you.
Yeah.
Is Nick's. There's a hero in him. Like whether he's got to be in his 70s now.
Oh yeah, 77.
So that's his thing. So you got to remember, Vietnam is our fathers. The average Vietnam guy. I mean, if you were in at like 74, you're in your late 60s.
Yeah.
So most of them are mid 70s.
Yeah.
Even bordering.
Yeah, and they're not doing a whole lot of them aren't doing great because again, my father, what he had, the Agent Orange, caught up with Nick, caught up with a lot of other people. It's a real thing. I mean, for a very long time in the the government, you did not want to acknowledge that that they dropped pesticide on people and poison
Dioxin.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully Vietnam one day will become as popular in memory as World War II.
That's the problem. And we talk about like some of the, like my father never talked about it, never talked about his experience. And the reason why I have that is anytime I would try to talk about, like I see a war movie, I would try to ask him, change the subject. Let's go get some ice cream.
Let's go get some ice cream.
So he would always, he wouldn't talk about it. He buried it. But he was not unlike a lot of people. But you talk about World War II, Band of Brothers and all these different, movies and, that are just incredible, right? It was a popular war. They came back, parade, and, they were heroes. They were
Sailor
hailed.
kissing a girl in Times Square.
Yeah.
Nick told me, the first story he told me was when he got back, he flew into San Francisco and they threw fruit at him, pineapples and bananas, and it wasn't his fault. He was over there. He got
course not.
drafted into it. Like he didn't want to be there himself.
But look what he did later in his life. Now, Nick, I think the byline is once a hero, always a hero.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
No matter the reward.
So one day we'll get there when the history paints them in the proper light. Just like the guys who went over to Europe, they didn't want to go to Europe. They really didn't. We've had them in here.
Yeah.
They didn't want to go to Europe. But guess what? They did. They did their duty. They did what they were told to do. They did what they felt was right. And the same guys over in Vietnam. And listen, they had to do all sorts of stuff, but that's war. Unfortunately, that's war. So where can our audience find you?
Oh man. It's funny. Like when I cover Rutgers, like I would write 4 or 5 times a day, sometimes. Now, like my stories, my bylines are few and far between now. NJ.com. Whenever, you'll go to NJ.com and you'll find me there, occasionally. And then, Twitter, X or whatever it's called now.
Yes.
I don't tweet a whole lot. I'm very, like, I got burned a few times where I would, have an opinion on something and then never goes well. So I'll choose it very, very, like if I tweet it, it's normally like a shout out to someone.
Yeah.
But Twitter's K Sargeant NJ, that's my handle.
Well, we'll put that in the show notes as well. As hopefully we'll have a lower third if Andrew does his job correctly. So, Keith, we're coming to the end of this thing here, and I don't even know how to bring this up because you're where everybody wants to be. All right, you've made a profession out of a passion. Okay, but I'm sure it wasn't easy because the stories you cover, you become personally invested in them, and you sort of take on some of their pain. It's a lot, not to any extent that you do, but we do the same thing in here. So I understand that, and there's some suffering involved in that. I don't know how much you take with you, but I do know that what you report and what you see and your process as a journalist and a reporter, there's some suffering involved, but it has to have taught you something. And I always like to know what it taught you.
I didn't take my work home. If I had one regret in life, or if I had one do-over, it would be to have a job where I could turn off the computer or turn off my phone, when I get home. I can't do that for the longest time. I was always on deadline. Even now, like if a source calls me, I feel obligated to talk to the person. Doesn't matter what time. I'll give you one instant, during the course of my reporting with the other story. One of the sources who took a very long time to get them to talk, and they had vital information. We finally got them to talk, and we talked to them probably around 7 o'clock that night. 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone, was on my bedside table, rings. It didn't wake me up. It was on vibrate. Something happened where I do hear it, and he was basically, like, the voicemail message was like distraught. Like, I can't believe we feel like we're our lives are going to be in danger, and I had to talk to him for an hour that night. At 3 o'clock in the morning, talking to them literally off the ledge, not literally, but talking to them, trying to bring them comfort, trying to tell them it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. And then I go back to bed, and my wife clearly, I woke her up. It's like, really? 3 o'clock in the morning? And I get, that would be, the part I've always said before when I was a sports writer, I had the fun job where, going back to what you said before, where everyone would want to talk about sports. Okay, I covered 2 Super Bowls. I covered, the Yankees and the Jets and, the Giants. I covered, a lot of professional sports for a time being. People would love to talk about that. But, now, when I think people understand. If there's one thing that I think my friends have gotten to know me, I don't really like talking about like my job. I think one of the things that you talked about is like I don't want to associate myself with other journalists to talk about what we do. I want to talk with other interesting people. I want to know what they do, and I guess, I try not to make it about me. I try not to bring my work home and try to talk about my work, when I'm outside of it. I don't know if I'm doing a great job with it, but it's gotten me to this point.
But you're trying to bring about some resolution in the articles that you write. And that's pretty much what you're trying to do.
And that would be, circling back to the cop story. That would be the one thing where if anyone's going to read it, as a sports writer, even, you always try to find an answer, right?
Yeah.
There's no answer to, I'm going to, spoil alert. There's a lot of answers. There's a lot of theories. There's a lot of, why, but there's no answer.
There's no it's happening because of this.
No.
It doesn't happen that way.
So, and that's hard as a journalist when you set out, you're like, okay.
But you might be the start. All right? So the article that you wrote may be the start of that search for that answer. Because I think the answer's out there. Everything has an answer. Okay? It's how do you look for it? How do you find it? It's just not very evident. So that's what articles such as yours do. They sort of open everybody's eyes.
I hope.
Well, I do appreciate you coming in here, and
Thank you for having me.
I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful to make this connection. I'm so grateful to know you.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's going to do it for this episode of The Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of a Journalist with Keith Sargeant. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. You have to look in every direction for a hero because you never know where you're going to find them. Don't take your work home with you. Sacrifice to follow your passion. Open the vein to get your best work. Is the juice worth the squeeze? But most importantly, let's go get some ice cream.
There you go.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount on your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X. We're now on Rumble, and of course, OnlyFans. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. Follow Tom at The Tom Flynn. And of course, follow The Suffering Podcast. And we're going to see you on the next episode.